My guest at this time is John Bellini. He's a geophysicist at the U.S. Geological Survey in Colorado. He joins me now to offer more information on the earthquakes that struck in and around Anchorage, Alaska on Friday. And John, thanks so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
First of all, what do we know about the official magnitudes of the first earthquake and the aftershocks?
The main shock for the Anchorage, Alaska earthquake was a magnitude 7.0. As of this time, we've recorded a number of aftershocks. The count is currently at 50 aftershocks of magnitude 2.5 and larger. The largest aftershock so far was a magnitude 5.7 that occurred roughly 6 minutes after the 7.0 main shock.
What do we know about its epicenter, its depth, and that sort of thing?
Well, the epicenter of the magnitude 7.0 is approximately 8.5 miles north of downtown Anchorage. The depth of this earthquake is around 55 kilometers, and they're doing some additional computations on that. But right now, we have the depth at around 55 kilometers deep, which is normal for this area.
And what does that tell us about how far away it may have been felt?
Well, when you have a earthquake that's not at the surface, an earthquake that has some depth, such as this, it tends to be felt over a wider area. Although this earthquake is quite large to begin with, so it would have been felt over a wide area anyway.
How common are earthquakes in Alaska? I assume they're not too common at 7.0, but how common are they even at a, 4 or 5 level?
You probably have something in the 4 range somewhere in Alaska, including the Aleutians, every day. 5 magnitude earthquake, I'm going to say somewhere in the neighborhood once every week or so.
Really?
Alaska is the most seismically active state in the U.S., and they have several earthquakes of measurable size every hour somewhere in Alaska.
Obviously, it's on the Pacific Ring of Fire, as it's commonly known, frequent earthquakes in and around the Pacific Rim. What kind of season have we had in general in terms of earthquakes in and around the Pacific?
It's been fairly normal. I mean, like you said, it's an active region. It's the most active region in the world, you could say, or it is the primary region where most of the earthquakes occur, but that's just because of the number of plate boundaries in and around it. So that's where you see the most earthquakes, and the largest ones that we record on a regular basis are in that region for the most part. You do see some in the Atlantic basin from time to time, but not nearly as many as the Pacific.
You mentioned that 5.0 earthquakes in Alaska almost come on a weekly basis, or do come on a weekly basis. So when they occur near a population center at this magnitude of 7.0, it's going to get a lot more attention. When was the last time, if you have any information on that the Anchorage area or any population center in Alaska was hit by something this big?
Depends on how close you go to Anchorage. If you go fairly close to Anchorage, the last one, there was one of, there's a magnitude 6.8 in 1933 that was fairly close to today's earthquake. A little farther off southwest of it by about 200 kilometers in 2016, there was a magnitude 7.1. So the Anchorage area and the wider Anchorage area does see earthquakes of size from time to time. Since about 1900, there have been roughly 14 earthquakes of magnitude 6.5 and larger within about 200 kilometers, 120 miles of Anchorage.
So, as you said, a very active area. What's typical in terms of aftershocks? So you mentioned there's been 50 already, one as high as 5.7 and 50 at 2.5 or greater. How long do they generally last after the first quake, and do they generally get weaker and weaker over time, or does it vary?
The aftershock series from a magnitude 7.0 earthquake typically lasts from weeks to months. Occasionally, you'll see something some months afterward. What we've seen so far is fairly typical of a magnitude 7.0 earthquake. So in the next few days to several weeks, we will see quite a few earthquakes that are large enough to be felt within the Anchorage area, or felt widely within the Anchorage area. So people in that area do need to be prepared for more of this.
Is there any indication that a quake of this magnitude at this spot in the Ring of Fire means that another spot is now more vulnerable?
Generally, you don't really see earthquakes like this triggering a large earthquake somewhere else. Historically, when we've had a large magnitude 8.0 earthquakes in, say, places such as Alaska or others, you may see a small earthquake triggered at a distance as the waves that propagate out from the epicenter pass through the area. But generally, they're not known to trigger larger earthquakes in other places. That said, the Pacific Rim of Fire is an active region, and they can have large earthquakes from time to time. Globally, we typically see about 15 earthquakes magnitude 7.0 and larger somewhere in the world.
Those of us in the news media like to gather, obviously, as much information as possible to get it out to folks. From your expertise as a geophysicist, what data coming in from this earthquake will interest you the most?
Really, the most interesting thing about it for myself as someone who does this for a living is where it occurred. Because it occurred near a populated area in a state in the United States, which is our focus, of course, that's what makes it interesting. Hopefully, what we can learn from it is how to protect people from their effects and maybe help to design buildings that withstand earthquakes of this size to a better extent. I mean, there will be other earthquakes of large size in other places in the United States, such as California, and every little bit of data helps to prepare for that.
Yeah, follow up on that just a little bit. The good news is, the very good news is that it appears that no one has been killed that we know of or serious injuries, but there does seem to be a tremendous amount of infrastructural damage. Does that surprise you at all? And what does that tell you?
The fact that there's been no reports of death and low casualties so far, I think that's definitely a good thing, and I think it goes to show that there are the building codes that they have in Alaska to protect or mitigate against the hazards of earthquakes are doing their jobs. The things that kill people are buildings falling on them, or buildings or parts of buildings, injuring them. That's what causes all the death and casualties. And the fact that those numbers seem to be very low at this early stage of the event goes to show that the building codes are doing something to protect people.
Well, it's very good news, as we just said, that there have been no fatalities here. Let's hope there are no serious injuries as more people are found and can check in and so forth. But understanding what happened here and what the significance is in the larger region is important as well. So, John, thank you very much for your time today. We greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome.
John Bellini is a geophysicist at the U.S. Geological Survey. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.